Herzlich willkommen zu Handelsblatt Rethink Work, dem Podcast rund um Mensch, neue Arbeitswelt und Führung. Mein Name ist Julia Beil, ich leite das Karriere- und Management-Team des Handelsblatts. Schön, dass Sie dabei sind.
Mitarbeitende durch KI ersetzen. Bei dem Thema drucksen viele CEOs ja eher herum. Man will ja auch keine Ängste auslösen oder Dinge erzählen, die dann am Ende doch nicht so kommen. Anders der CEO des Zahlungsdienstleisters Klarna, Sebastian Siemiatkowski. Im Interview mit unserem Handelsblatt-Chefredakteur Sebastian Matthes sagte er, mit KI können wir die Zahl unserer Mitarbeiter von 3.400 auf 2.000 reduzieren. Besonders spannend an dem Gespräch fand ich seine Vision über die Zukunft des Bankings. Dass die Zeit der Bankfilialen vorüber ist, ist ja den meisten eher klar. Aber welche Rolle spielen Chatbots zukünftig beim Banking? Will man denen sein Geld anvertrauen? Siemiatkowski hat da sehr eindeutige Antworten. Viel Spaß bei dem Gespräch.
To us, it became very clear that eventually we will get to this. It's a little bit like self-driving cars. You know, we've talked about them a lot, but they haven't really happened. But this summer I was with the kids and in San Francisco and we went with Waymo and it was amazing. It was fantastic, and it actually worked, right? So eventually it will happen. It's just a question of time. And this was the same for digital financial services. So ever since 2015, this has been the direction for Klarna. We wanted to build that digital financial assistant of yours that, helps you save money, save time, make you feel in more control of your finances.
Hallo und herzlich willkommen zu einer neuen Ausgabe von Handelsblatt Disrupt, dem Podcast über neue Ideen, Disruption und die Zukunft der digitalen Welt. Mein Name ist Sebastian Matthes und ich begrüße Sie wie immer ganz herzlich aus unserem Podcast-Studio hier in Düsseldorf. Im Frühjahr hat das schwedische Fintech Klarna so richtig Schlagzeilen gemacht. Und zwar mit der Ankündigung, dass das Unternehmen die Zahl der Mitarbeiter bei seinem Callcenter-Dienstleister massiv reduzieren will, weil sie nicht mehr gebraucht werden, und zwar wegen KI. Aber das war noch nicht alles. Der Klarna-Gründer teilte seinen Kolleginnen und Kollegen auch mit, dass sein Unternehmen schrumpfen wird. Nicht etwa bei der Zahl der Kunden oder der Umsätze, hier wächst das Unternehmen jedes Jahr, sondern bei der Zahl der Mitarbeiter. Mehr als jeder zweite Job der Firma könnte verschwinden, weil viele Aufgaben künftig von KI erledigt werden. Wie diese Nachricht bei den Mitarbeitern selbst ankam, wie er die besten Leute trotzdem zu halten versucht, welche Innovationen er für die nächsten Monate plant, all das bespreche ich jetzt mit Sebastian Siemiatkowski, dem Mitgründer und CEO von Klarna. Er erzählt dabei auch, wie sein erstes Treffen mit OpenAI-Gründer Sam Altman abgelaufen ist, warum er glaubt, dass ohne KI kein wesentliches Unternehmen überleben wird, wer seine größten Vorbilder sind, was seine größten Fehler waren und natürlich auch, was dran ist an dem Gerücht, dass sein Unternehmen bald an die Börse geht. Und damit jetzt zu meinem Gespräch mit Sebastian Siemiatkowski, dem CEO des Zahlungsdienstleisters Klarna. Sebastian, welcome to the show.
Danke.
You recently made headlines around AI, but you are also one of the first successful European fintechs. So before we talk about AI, and everybody's talking about AI these days, and how this technology will shape your company and also the future overall, let's talk how this all began. You founded Klarna 19 years ago, is that right?
Yes, isn't it? It's crazy. Next year is going to be 20 years.
So how did this all start? You were 23 and in the middle of your economics studies, right?
Right. Yeah, no, so we were, for whatever, I don't know, I'm a Polish immigrant kid, right? My parents were from Poland and fled from the communistic country. And I grew up in Sweden. I always had this wish to start a company for some crazy idea. I don't know why, but I was always very inspired by the founder of IKEA, Ingvar Kamprad, and the H&M, and also I remember reading Richard Branson's book about Virgin and stuff like that. So it was always interesting to me. And then I went to Stockholm School of Economics and, a little bit too early. I wasn't too excited. I did a gap year. I spent backpacking as you were supposed to do.
Right.
So we backpacked. We traveled around the world without flying. A little bit ahead of our time.
Without flying. So where did you go?
Everywhere. We actually started so I worked in Kempinski in St. Moritz. That's where I did we earned some money there. And I did also learn a little bit of Swiss Dutch, but I'm not too good at it. So don't ask me anything. But
no German at all?
No, I understand German. If you speak, I understand well.
Okay.
But ich spreche Deutsch sehr schlecht. So
not so bad.
Mach das nicht. But we did. We traveled from Switzerland over obviously Russia. We did what's it called? I forgot now. I'm just too much summer brain still. We did the Trans-Siberian, of course. The Trans-Siberian, and then we went down through China, and we got a boat over from Australia to Mexico, and it was cool. Saw a lot of the world. The world is much bigger than you realize when you're on an airplane.
And when did you get this idea for Klarna?
So the funny thing is, when I came back from that trip, we were a little bit late, so I couldn't continue my studies at the university as a consequence. So I got an additional gap year, and coming back, I basically started working. I just got any job I could find at that point in time. It was a low economy in Sweden then, and so I found a job as a sales guy at a factoring firm that was doing account receivables and factoring and stuff like that. And it was hard to find clients that were interested. I was a phone sales guy, so I was just calling companies. But I started calling these small e-commerce companies. And you have to remember, in Sweden, we didn't have Amazon back then. So there was a lot of great small entrepreneurs that had gone online, and they were like, oh, look, I can put cat food on Google AdWords. And I get a lot of people want to buy cat food and sell cat food. So there was a lot of excitement, a lot of fun, small entrepreneurs building businesses. And I realized that they really needed a payment solution. So that was kind of where the idea started.
Okay. What was the moment that you thought, okay, I will start a company?
Well, as I said, I've always had this, I don't know why, but I've always had this interest. I always thought it was a cool thing, even before it became, much more fashionable to be an entrepreneur. I mean, I remember in my school, at least in the university, Stockholm School of Economics, at that point of time, only 7% wanted to start a company. Today it's 70, 80%. So it's really changed. But I thought it was super exciting. And I came back to school after a year at that company. The company was not really serious. So I pulled in a lot of clients. The clients were unhappy and things didn't work out. But I thought maybe I would have a chance. And then there was a small incubator at the school who was I went to them and they said oh, this is a great idea. You should try it. And then I felt okay, I'm a little bit embarrassed now if I wouldn't try it. So we pulled two friends together, Nicholas and Victor, and then we started working really hard. And after 6 months, we were quite early successful in Sweden. It went quite fast actually in Sweden to get success. And we started seeing it was profitable after only 6 months. So it worked really, really well. But then it took some time for us to get to other markets.
And did you ever go back to university?
The funny thing is that, my Polish parents obviously very ambitious. And so they didn't care about the company success. They were still you need a degree from university. So even though we were already, I don't think we were employing 50, 60 people and the company was profitable. But I still in 2007 decided to just quickly, I worked full time and I fixed my university. Right, okay. So I did get my degree eventually.
So what did your parents say later about your company? Are they happy now?
Well, now you're into difficult things. I think they are. Both. I had a pretty rough upbringing. My especially my father had fairly big issues with alcohol and abuse and stuff. So there was I think somewhere in his heart he was proud, but I also think to some degree, he felt himself that he was, intellectually smart, had the prerequisites, and ended up in Sweden, doing work like driving a cab or other things. And he felt himself as a failure. I think he saw himself as a failure. And I think to some degree, in some strange way, as much as he was happy about what I had accomplished, he also had a hard time comparing it to his own life. So it was a difficult thing for him. So I don't think he really expressed pride over me in that sense. So it makes it difficult. But that's just how life goes, right?
You mentioned some of these very well-known entrepreneurs. You talked about Richard Branson, the founder of IKEA. Did you ever meet them?
That's a good question. Have I met him? Well, the only one I met is the founder, or like the big guy behind H&M, right? I met him, Stefan Persson, once. But I've had opportunities to meet cool founders after that. But no, I didn't. I really regretted that I never met Ingvar Kamprad, the founder of IKEA, because I still think that's maybe the company. I mean, today when I look at Richard Branson, he's kind of cool, but a lot of it is also just like branding, right? Like he's just a great marketer.
A lot of marketing, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I probably today don't view him as like the number one inspiration source for building a business. But I think Ingvar Kamprad is just such an amazing story. Like I love that. I also read actually this summer. I read the biography of Sam Altman, who built Walmart. So I love that story. It was also like very, very much my kind of story. You know, he's out in the countryside. He's like, I don't compete in the big cities. I'm just in the countryside, and then like builds this like and just refines this business for like 30 years. And then once it's like perfect, he just like swoops the world with it. And now it's the biggest company in the world by revenue. It's crazy. So it's cool stories.
What I like about these stories is that obviously you also founded a very successful company, and it all looks so easy from our standpoint right now. But when you build this, it's really tough, and you have to decide difficult things. Strategies often don't really work at the first hand. So what would you say were the biggest mistakes or challenges in the first years of this company?
Well, I think our biggest challenge for once is that we were not, I think actually I would say poor advice in our perspective. And that's because when Klarna was founded in 2005, there was really no other companies that had done the similar things in a long period of time. Okay, so we had a few companies, but like, I mean, maybe the one that we were most inspired by was Skype by Niklas Zennström, because it was the only like digital company or tech company that was not American, it wasn't based in Silicon Valley, and that still had kind of really created, you know, international success and global success. And so in the early days, I think before we got an investment from Sequoia and Michael Morris joined our board, which was 2009, but for the first 5 years, we had a lot of people that we were listening to that were advising us on what to do that actually hadn't built a business like this. And I think many times they were just not advising as well. Like I had, for example, you know, our technology side wasn't too good at the beginning, and I had a lot of thoughts around how to improve it and stuff like that. And I had a person on my board who was consistently not advising me correctly, but I was 24 or 25, and I felt, look, this guy is like 15 years older than me, and he's been an engineer his whole life, and he must know this much better than me. So I didn't trust my own instincts. I listened a lot. And I feel that was actually, I say that to a lot of people nowadays, that like, I think people, you know, in general should trust their own instincts more. And also the benefit of that is that like, if it's your own decision, then you have to take accountability for it and learn from it if it becomes a mistake. But the downside of listening to others is you can say, well, it was because I listened to others. And then the problem is you don't really learn, right? So I think that those are the things I wish much more today. You know, I'm not sure that's good advice for people today, but like, I wish I would have learned to code myself and actually been much more involved in the technical side of the business earlier on, because I think that would have helped a lot.
And coming to decisions you took in the last 20 years, let's say, what was the biggest mistake, the mistake you learned most from?
There's so many. But I think that I think there's a lot. I mean, I think maybe, you know, one that I'm frustrated about is that when more from the recent years is actually when valuations were so high and like everything was going, you know, in that direction. I definitely saw and I recognized the fact that like, okay, this is going to be a hype, and then the hype is going to, you know, deflate again, and it's going to be, because it's always been like, I've already been in this industry for enough years to see that you'll have these like hype moments and then things go down. And
the valuation of 46 billion, right?
Exactly.
And then it crashed down to 7 billion.
Yeah, exactly. So that's a pretty big difference, even though, I mean, any company in the stock market saw the same valuation change, right, in tech. But I think what hurts me there is that I wish I would have been a little bit more cautious about hiring. I wish we didn't hire as much people as we did during that time, because then when we had to like change direction, it obviously is a tough and not something not something positive at all for anyone involved. So I wish.
Speaking about this crash, what happened there, and why was it so drastic?
Well, I think that what happened, I mean, basically from our point of perspective, the thing was that there's a few things to it. And I think first and foremost is that one of the things is that if you look at what Klarna is doing, being in the bank industry and, being a competitor to traditional banks, that is an industry in itself that has over $1 trillion market cap. So if you look at it, is it realistic that if we get disruption in banking, be it Revolut, Klarna, any of these contenders, Nubank in Brazil, whatever, is it realistic that we can see $100 billion market cap companies being built in these industries? I think the answer is yes, right? So I don't think that the valuation itself, like directionally speaking, is that crazy. It's more a question of, investors' willingness to give you credit for the future versus what they see today, right? And so for a period of time there, investors were really leaning into the future with low interest rates and so forth. They were leaning into that vision of the long-term opportunity much more. And what then ends up happening for us is that, like, okay, if you're looking at it, you can say we were at that point of time, we were making a loss of about $1 billion a year, which obviously is a lot of money. But making it into consideration that we were valued at $50 billion, that is a 2% dilution per year, which isn't that much from a dilution perspective for existing shareholders. So the point is that it makes sense to be very aggressive and invest a lot when valuations are that high and everyone is rewarding you for being forward-looking. And then the investor sentiment shifted very drastically. So we saw PayPal, we saw Block, Square, and other companies dropping 85, 90% in the stock market. And at that point of time, we obviously also needed to quickly adjust and start focusing on profit again. Now, fortunately for us, we have a very profitable business model. We've been profitable for 17 years of our existence. And so it was definitely, or 15 years of our existence, but it was definitely, it was something we could do. We could shift to it.
And the big loss you were talking about was from what exactly?
Well, it's a combination of things. So obviously our cost structure, the amount of people we had working on new stuff and so forth was too big. But partially it was also because we have seen that over and over again, that when we go into a new market, initially it's very hard to underwrite, so take the risk, because we don't know customers, right? So every customer is new, and when you have more new customers, you just have more credit losses. But when you have more repetitive customers that are using the service over and over again, then your losses come down. And in this case, we were a little bit unfortunate in the sense that we started growing massively in the US, but it was still a lot of new customers in the US. And so this happened to coincide with this. And this was pushing our costs to that extreme. But when we then basically slow down a little bit the growth in the US, we had much more repetitive customers that in combination with some of the other tough decisions we had to make, turned the company around. So that's why we're profitable again.
So you said investors are looking into the future. Let's look into the future. Today, Klarna is much more than it was when you started the company almost 20 years ago. What will Klarna be in, let's say, 5 years? Is it still a fintech? Is it a shopping app? Is it an Amazon competitor? How will it look like exactly? What will be the business model and how will we see it? Or will it just be a modern kind of bank?
Yeah, so I think that we've pivoted the business and changed the business direction a few times. So between 2005 and 2010, we were very much focused on Rechnung, Rechnungskauf, buy now, pay later, these kind of things. And that worked really well. Between 2010 and 15, we tried much more to focus on the merchant services. So like basically offering all payment methods like debit cards, credit card, Visa, MasterCard, and build like a universal checkout for merchants, which we were competing with companies like Stripe and Adyen and others in that. And in 2015, we concluded that they were winning. They were doing that much better than us. And so at that point in time, it was a little bit like and my two co-founders had left, and I was myself left at the business in 15. So it was kind of a pivotal point for the company where we were like, okay, either we pretend to be Stripe and Adyen, and then we sell the company, some private equity or some industrialist or whatever. And that's probably going to be a good financial outcome. But we also want to see maybe there's something else that we could do. Because the learning from 10 and 15 was that we had correctly understood where the market was going, because the products and the services that we had planned for and wanted to do, Stripe and Adyen did them, and they became $100 billion companies. So we understood the market well, but we hadn't executed as well as they had. We hadn't built the services as well. We hadn't done, the same good work, even though they were smaller companies than us from the beginning of 2010. So in 15, we sat down and we said, okay, if we don't do merchant side, maybe we should focus on the consumer side. And so we said, okay, what does the future of consumer financial services look like? And what's funny is that has actually been very consistent now for the last almost 10 years, which is that we said, okay, in the future, you wake up in the morning, your digital financial assistant will, have analyzed your spending and say maybe, hey, I look at your mortgage and you're paying, 50 euros too much on your mortgage every night. And I, as a digital financial assistant, have renegotiated and I found a new bank that will drop your cost. And I will also do the paperwork for you, so it's all done. The only thing you need to say as a customer is, yes, do you want to save 50 euros? And to us, it became very clear that like, eventually we will get to this. Like, it's a little bit like self-driving cars. We've talked about them a lot, but they haven't really happened. But this summer I was with the kids and in San Francisco, and we went with Waymo, and it was amazing. It was fantastic, and it actually worked, right? So like, eventually it will happen. It's just a question of time. And this was the same for digital financial services. So ever since 2015, this has been the direction for Klarna. We wanted to build that digital financial assistant of yours that, helps you save money, save time, make you feel in more control of your finances.
Okay.
And then, then obviously part of that is just that like, some things go faster, some things go slower, some things have done better. And then AI comes along and kind of, makes us believe that that's going to happen even faster. But like, that's the direction.
Let's quickly, for everybody who didn't follow the history of Klarna closely, what can you do exactly today, and in which fields do you see the biggest difficulties?
Well, I think that what you can do today already, like the way it works, like what people mostly think of Klarna today, right? That's when they go shop online and they see the button and they see, okay, it's a button. I have a PayPal button and a Klarna button, right? And in most markets today, we offer both like a credit payment, like a Rechnung, or like some, pay after delivery. But we also offer like support, kind of pay now instantly. But then people start opening the app, and in the app, they start realizing, wow, the app is actually more, for example, in our app, different than all the other banking apps, you have the full digital receipt. So you can see not only that you purchased, 50 euros at H&M, you can see the actual sweater and the color and the size and, all the things. And then we start building other financial services there. You can also save money with us. You can, we can help you with track your shipment, find out where your package are. We can help you with budgeting of your, and get all of your bank accounts in there, et cetera, et cetera. So it kind of builds into a full banking experience. But the starting point is always somebody shopping online or in store and seeing that. You can get a card from us now. I think we have a few 100,000 cards in Germany as an example, people using that. So like, there's basically all of the banking services are coming, but it starts very much with somebody, wanting to make a purchase and then see the button, right?
But eventually you have to become a complete bank that can...
Yep.
Okay, so that would be an alternative to at least ING, Deutsche Bank, Commerzbank.
Yep.
So when will this actually happen?
Well, so it's happened to some degree. I mean, in Germany, for example, is one of the markets where we come the furthest. So you have a savings account, you have the full thing, you can pay your bills through Klarna, you can do more and more. But it's, to us, it's happening in steps, and we're getting more and more mature because there's a lot of infrastructure to build out. I mean, the banks have been around for 100, 150 years, right? So there's a lot of services that they provide. And we're still figuring out exactly what we do and what we don't do, right? So, for example, we're not offering trading, which Revolut does as an example, trading in stock and stuff like that. We have decided not to do that. So it's a little bit like, different. But I think...
Why did you decide that? Because this would be a quite profitable thing to do, right?
Yeah, I think that trading to me is... I mean, the basic savings that you can save your money in a deposit account and so forth, that we are going to offer. But the more advanced trading, when it's trading in stock and so forth, it quickly becomes a kind of different service where people are very nerdy about it and they have a lot of opinions, expectations. So it just becomes I think those are going to stay as two separate different services.
Okay, but if you want to be a bank, don't you have to offer everything? I want one app for all my financial services.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think there will be some things that are separate, right? So I think trading is example one that I believe will be separate from others. But again, it becomes I think it's a question of how of an advanced trader are you? I'm sure there are people in Germany who buy stock directly with Deutsche Bank or with Sparkasse, but there's also tons of German, people who have special trading apps and use something else for trading on the stock market. So it's a little bit you may have the more basic services, but you may not necessarily compete with the full offering, right? So it's just a question of where do you want to be really good?
Okay. But just this week you had some exciting news. So let's talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, what we're really happy about is the fact that we are doing exactly, getting closer and closer to the full banking offer, right? So we both now will have the Klarna balance, which means that you can have positive balances and send money to friends, and you can use those when shopping online. And then we will also offer the cashback, which is more traditional, but also very important for bank users, right? So you can get up to 10% when you use our app on that. And you can also save money with us in the app directly, where we offer up to 3.6% interest. So this is pretty cool. I mean, in Germany especially, people love savings accounts. So it's a great product for them.
Let's talk about your numbers. How many people, you mentioned a few thousand have the card in Germany. So how many people use Klarna overall and how many in Europe? Could you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think the number now is about 70, 80 million active users globally. But our largest market have become the US, right? So in the last few years, US has really taken off. And then the second largest market is Germany, the UK, and so forth.
Okay. And how much money does Klarna earn overall?
I mean, revenue-wise now we're above $2 billion in revenue. But obviously the transaction volume that goes through Klarna is much, much, much greater, right? So it's over $100 billion that flows through the system every year. And what people use it for.
Okay, and the revenue growth, how big is that year over year?
Yeah, it's been Klarna has very consistently been around 30% growth for many, many years, which has been kind of very consistent. Obviously with COVID and everything, we had an increase. But over time, that's been kind of the traditional growth rate.
And do you think this will speed up after this news this week?
I think so. I think that there are a few very interesting announcements that Klarna is going to make in the coming 6 months that I think will further increase the speed of the growth.
Oh, yes. We can talk about them as well.
I'm not allowed. The PR team will kill me if I do that. So. But I'm very excited about the growth opportunity, and I think again it speaks to what we said about the future of financial services. When we say about that digital financial assistant, my guess is that you will probably have 4 or 5 global companies that act as kind of the main banking partner of consumers in the future, right? And I don't know if it's 3 years down the road or 10 years down the road or whatever, but that's the direction.
Okay.
So our bet and what we need to make sure is Klarna is one of them. That's pretty much it.
Okay. I was just wondering when this financial assistant would come to reality in my life, but you can't say.
It will definitely in your life. That's for real. I mean, already if you look at, we announced the AI chat assistant, customer service assistant, right? That is the beginning of that direction. And it's already taking care about 2/3 of our customer service calls are taken care of with that. And it has had a successful, the customer satisfaction is equal or sometimes higher than when people interact with a human. People resolve their errands instead of 11 minutes in 2 minutes. So I think the beginning is there already, but as we all know who have tried AI, it is not always consistent. So there's a lot of work still to be done in order to fully get there.
Let's talk a bit more about AI. This spring, you announced that your new AI-based chatbot called Kiki could take on as much work as 700 full-time employees, many of your roughly 5,000 employees. How's that been going so far?
It's been going really well, but I think we have both the external-facing customer service chatbot that you're referring to. That's the one that basically did the job of about 700 people. And then we also have the internal one that we use for our employees, which is the one that we call Kiki, which is doing that. So it's currently we have a number of initiatives around AI, and it's doing really, really well. I think to me, this is very similar again to self-driving cars. Is that all these new technologies will have these hypes, and then first media will rave about it, and then media will find all the negative stuff about it, and the sentiment in businesses will follow media. So people will first, the CEOs will feel like, oh my God, I have to invest in this, and then the next 6 months they'll say, oh, look at all this
doesn't work.
It doesn't work, and so we don't need to do this.
I know.
And so there will be these back and forth. But from my perspective, it's I can see that the technology works. And then I understand that there are things that obviously needs to be fixed and that are still early. Just like self-driving cars, take a lot of years until it really did. But again, when I was in that Waymo car in San Francisco, I was just thinking, my God, this is going to change everything. It's finally happening, right? It's just, it takes a little bit longer time.
Sure, it's basically what the Gartner hype cycle is showing.
Exactly.
And the dangerous situation always is, I was thinking in the last couple of weeks that after this hype, everybody says, well, the technology won't bring what everybody expected. And then they don't go on, they don't invest more, they don't educate their people. And so that's a dangerous situation because a small group of organizations, companies are investing and they are overtaking everybody else after this. So you say AI works in your company. So let's talk about that and talk a little bit about what exactly you do with AI and where do you see the biggest benefits so far?
Well, I think that and to me, it's been a combination of AI and a few other things. But from our perspective, it's the fact is that in an information company like ours, a lot of it is making sure that the employees have access to the correct information and the right information. And you'd be surprised, even in smaller companies, but even more so in larger companies, how much of things happen in silos and how many people are not aware of what's going on over there or find it difficult to find that information. People have invested in these intranets and, ways to solve for this problem. But it is still a massive problem, and it creates a lot of duplication within institutions where people are working on similar tasks or even competing tasks and not really being able to fully contribute to each other's success and really build on each other's. And what we've seen is that with AI, it allows us to actually make sure that all the information is at the hands of people. It's more available, it's easier, faster, and it's clearer where to contribute with that information. So we've taken a lot of inspiration from also more, we've combined AI with a lot of inspiration from what we call Git and kind of software code. If you think about software development, it's really, to a large degree, engineers are writing tons of text, and they need that text to be very clear and very precise, and they need that text to not be, have bugs and issues and stuff like that. But for people outside of engineering, people in marketing or in other parts of the company, there's much less control and clarity around everything that's being produced and so forth. And so we've learned a lot of also combining those learnings and then put AI on top of that. Because I think what AI is not great at is answering questions. The truth is a very interesting concept for AI, right? And AI has a big problem with the truth, the way it works currently. It has a tendency to hallucinate, to come up with things. And it doesn't always answer. And sometimes the answers to a lot of questions can be very general, like, oh, how should I do marketing? And it will sound like the worst piece of management literature that is so high level that you can't really do anything with that, right? But what is amazing with AI is it has a reasoning capability that didn't exist with computers before. So, I mean, computers initially were calculators that we used to calculate math. And then we realized we can build everything from an operating system to, Adobe Photoshop with those calculators or whatever, right? We could do a lot of other things on top of that. But in essence, it's just numbers being calculated. The interesting thing here with AI, to me, is this reasoning capability. And as much as you may be frustrated if you ask it the general question, what I find exciting is that if you break a problem down further and further, like if you go to AI and say, hey, here's a front of a house. What would you expect to see at the front of a house? It will tell you windows and doors. And that is something that you couldn't do with a computer before. If you take any problem that we face in work life, whatever it is, they may be very complex and have tons of different pieces. But if you start dividing them down into small and smaller pieces, you will eventually hit a question that's similar to the one I did about the house. And so if you start connecting AI and work in multiple facets, you can actually have a very, very productive contributing factor to the humans doing a lot of the work.
It's interesting. I've read that at Klarna you have meanwhile put hiring for non-technical and non-engineering staff on hold. Is that true?
Yeah. Actually, yes.
So how does that work? Because I mean, it means that marketing, for example, is done by AI.
Yep.
So you just said the answers are maybe not always satisfying coming from AI. So what does that mean?
Well, first and foremost, like for us, it was just that when ChatGPT was announced and we, as many others, started playing around with it and so forth, we were like, oh my God, this is going to change a lot, right? And then we encourage all our employees to start trying it out and testing it and working it. And we actually allowed them to basically test it on anything as long as it, privacy and consumer and all that stuff. But as long as they were in those confinements, it was totally fine for them to play around. And out of that came a few projects. Some projects were less productive, some were more productive. And then we came to the conclusion that what this will actually mean is that we will be able to get much more done with much fewer people than we have been historically. And so back in about September, October, we said, let's stop hiring, right? And so we've stopped hiring, which means you have to remember, because we, at that point in time, were about 4,500, I think, or something. As any tech company, we have a natural attrition. So people leave the company after about 5 years, which is pretty standard for any tech company. So this means that if we don't hire, we shrink about 20% on an annual basis. So we wanted to avoid the situation of layoffs. And so instead we just say, if we stop hiring, we will start shrinking, and which we have been doing now. So I think last time I looked at the number, we're now 3,400 or something. And I have, in the back of my mind, I have a target that I think about 2,000 people is probably pretty good. Now, and I've been very open about this in the company as well. So everyone knows that 2,000 is the number. But it's not there's no time frame. So it doesn't have to happen tomorrow. It's just directionally speaking, right? And then what we do is we've constantly explored a lot of AI tools out there to help automate and simplify things that we're doing internally. And so what we've seen is that as we shrink, and people apply and people use AI a lot internally, they are just getting more and more productive and they can do more things. Right. And to some degree also, obviously, we benefit from the fact of being less because we have less people we need to communicate with and so forth. So we also have some upsides in that. And so it's just shown so far that we can actually get more done. Now, we use AI. It's not like AI does it itself. It's not like AI today pushes a marketing campaign from end to end itself, right? It's not at that level yet. But we've seen it take over a lot of the steps that previously we had to do. And at the same point of time, what we also are doing is we're reducing the number of systems, because what we saw previously is we had so many of these software as a service solutions inside the company, which siloed a lot of the information through different systems. And the issue with that is that it's hard to build AI on top of that. What people don't realize is that there's a rule in data scientists which says shit in, shit out, right? So if you put a lot of shit data in, you get a lot of shit data out. So the same applies for AI. You have to really be obsessed about cleaning and improving the quality of the information internally. The better information you have, the more likely AI is to give you a good output. And so a lot of the effort has been about how do we improve the quality of the input and make it better and more precise and accurate and so forth. And so, and then the other thing that's been critical, I would say, lasting on this topic is that we have told all our employees that one of the benefits of this will be that Klarna will have a lower total salary cost. So we will spend less on people. However, we also plan, and we have done that now just before summer, to pay more per individual, right? So there's a benefit for everyone working here.
How much? Can you say that?
How much? No, It's been quite significant, actually. We're increasing the pay per individual. I don't have the exact number, but it's significant. So the idea is that everyone that participates in this transition of the company will benefit from it, right? And then some people choose to leave, which is totally fine, right? And people find other careers or want to do other things. And also what's been funny is that because we've gotten so much media around our AI initiatives, people are telling me they get 10 times as many offers on LinkedIn that they used to. So there's also it actually increases the career opportunities for our people as well, which has been quite positive for everyone. But I think that but obviously it's a tough message. And I wanted it to be a honest message within the organization that we are going to shrink, we're going to become less, but we want to avoid layoffs, right?
How did this tough message change the culture inside the company?
Well, I think that there's a mix. I mean, people will always be nervous when you're honest about these things. But I think also to some degree, I feel that first and foremost, it depends on what kind of people you have in the organization. I mean, in our case, with the exception of customer service that's outsourced, and that's, slightly different. So there we work in a different fashion because it's outsourced. But for the people working at Klarna that are not in customer service, they are very highly paid, people compared to the general population, right? These are engineers or people with very high salaries if you look at the average salaries in a country. And so to some degree, I feel that it's part of the relationship that you have a trust relationship with such individuals and you tell them. But then what we've also been very clear about is that we encourage and that's been the message for the last 12 months, is you can see this as scary, but you can also see it as an opportunity to learn AI and lean into it. And we invite everyone. It doesn't matter if you're an engineer or not. Everyone has been invited to code. The number of people that are not engineers at Klarna that code now with the help of AI has exploded, right? People are learning to use technology in a different way than they used to. So I think we're really trying to, we're trying to be honest but also give, highlight to people this is an opportunity. If you just lean into it, you can do that. But also if you obviously feel that it's very scary, then, maybe you should, look for opportunities elsewhere as well. That's not an option, right? But I feel still the majority has reacted very well to this. I think that's one of the biggest challenges for CEOs and companies is to realize that you cannot satisfy everyone. We have over 4,000 people. They will all be in different stages in life and, have different prerequisites. And so if I would try to satisfy everyone, it would be very difficult to get anything, done. But I need to make sure that we do, what's right for the majority, because they are going to be here many years and they want to have a good job and a good excitement. And then the only thing I can then do is try for people that are more nervous or, the minority, we can try to make sure that we can offer them support in those situations as well.
Because it sounds all so positive, but I guess a lot of people must be nervous because it also means when you're not able to use AI on a very high level, you can't stay forever, right?
Yeah, well, it hasn't been that yet, and I don't know.
But it will be eventually. You will never reach the 2000.
Right? Yeah, it could be, right? But I think that I think again that the most important thing is that that's going to happen anyway. That was the conclusion when we saw AI. We were like, look, and that's what I feel sometimes the other CEOs of large tech companies. I don't like the fact that people have been trying to there's always this right versus left, if you're on the right or left political spectrum. But if you're on the right political spectrum, people will say oh, don't worry, this has happened before. There will be new jobs created, right? And I just don't buy into that fully. Maybe it's because I'm European or something. But and then on the left-hand side, it's been a little bit let's stop progress. Let's stop progress because it may hurt people, right? And those are kind of the two conflicting views. And I'm more in the middle where I feel look, I genuinely think we have to lean into technology and we have to learn this, because there are non-democratical states out there and other areas where, like, if Europe gets behind on this, that could be a big issue for us. But on the other hand, as I've always said, like, if you look at Brussels, in Brussels, European Union employs 10,000 translators. 10,000 people are, translators. And so, like, AI can translate very effectively today. Like, already we have a fantastic company in Germany, DeepL, that does amazing translations, right? So, like, it can do that. And I don't think it's fair to expect 10,000 translators to become YouTube influencers tomorrow, right? Like, so we have to have an answer for people who may not be able to retrain. Maybe you're a little bit older, maybe, in a different part of your life and whatever, right? So there could be things like that. And I just think that society should try to think about what is the right answer for those, right? And that's the way I think about it in the microcosmos of Klarna as well. So, like, in general, I don't think I can stop progress, because Klarna will not survive as a company. It will hurt everyone if I do that. So I have to lean into progress. I have to promote progress. But at the same point of time, I can try to think, what can I do for the people that may be negatively affected? Can we be very generous? Can we do things for them? Can we promote, help them find jobs elsewhere? What can we do, right? So, and again, we haven't asked anyone to leave. We haven't reduced, we haven't done any layoffs or anything like that.
But you can't say this will be like this forever. Eventually there might be. No, because
it won't, right? I mean, the world will change, right? And eventually, if the company doesn't adapt, the company will fail, right? So it's the responsibility to lean into it, I think.
You collaborate with OpenAI for your AI initiative. And how did you meet Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI?
Yeah, so we were lucky. I mean, one of the best things ever was that we got Sequoia as an investor early on, who's one of the most prominent and successful investors in the Silicon Valley. And they, like, when I myself on Twitter at that point in time, or X nowadays, saw people raving about it, ChatGPT, I tried it myself and I was like, wow, this is cool. And so then I thought to myself, like, okay, Sam Altman is going to very quickly become a person that's very hard to reach. So I better reach out quickly. So
when was that? Right after ChatGPT came out?
Yeah, I think ChatGPT came out, like, really people started talking about it October, November.
Yeah, that was it.
And then, there was Christmas and whatever, but directly after Christmas, I reached out, I got an introduction, and I flew to San Francisco. And I was laughing about it a bit, because when I flew there, I had a 2-hour meeting slot with Sam. And by the time I arrived, it had shrunk down to 30 minutes. And so it was to me just an indication of how quickly, things were changing. But yeah, but it was important, and I was happy that I got that meeting. I was happy that we established a good relationship with them.
How did it go?
No, it went really well. I think I must say that, it's very different when, I don't know about other European founders, but I always feel when I go to Silicon Valley, like I'm the cousin from the countryside. Like, I'm coming to this cool place where all the, like, important people are, and then I'm coming from the countryside and, like, hello, I'm from Sweden. And so I feel a little bit embarrassed. And to some degree, I feel sometimes Silicon Valley, the downside of Silicon Valley and San Francisco is that they can sometimes be very internally looking, right? So they don't really look much to what's happening in the world. It's a lot like, oh, what did Facebook do and Google do? And like just
Sweden, where was that again?
Exactly. And so I think the difference with Sam was when I met him, I found a person in that very important role, which may actually for humanity turn out to be a very important role. A person who was very generous, a person who was genuinely very curious, and who, for example, said very early on, look, one of the things I'm planning is to do an international journey. I'm going to travel around the world and meet users across the world, not only in San Francisco. And he did that, right? He spent months on the road. And so I at least appreciated that a lot. That's the kind of person I hope to be CEO of a company that could potentially produce, over human superior intelligence, right?
So let's talk a little bit again about the future. Maybe you can talk a little bit about bigger AI projects that we will see in the next months, and in what directions are you thinking?
Well, I do think that right now, to some degree, I was actually talking to a colleague here this morning, and I said it's a little bit funny because we're in this situation that if you would have asked me 6 to 12 months ago, where's AI going to be in the summer of 2024? I actually would have predicted now that we would have seen more daily applications. But I think it is exactly the same thing that happened with self-driving cars, that you get this hype and now people are a little bit more like, hey, where are they, right? In our case, if I look at internally what we're doing, we are working heavily to improve the kind of the AI applications that we have, so the chat application that you're talking to. And I think we're in the next 6 to 12 months, two things will happen. Like one, on the external facing consumer products, that will take a little bit longer. But you will see within the next year more when you actually use our app and use our application, how AI supports and makes it much, 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 much better. So I expect that to see. And then I think in the shorter term, we're seeing tremendous gains already in effectivity and efficiency and productivity within the company. So there I'm already seeing. And I made this prediction about 6 months ago, which I think is true, and it speaks to what you said as well, which is that I'm expecting within 6 months, we'll start seeing a few companies accelerate, which means that they have adopted AI basically not only as like some, on the top thing experiment in some laboratory, but they have actually implemented it across a lot of the kind of foundation of their business. And this will mean that they will start accelerating in the sense that they will be able to go from idea to ship product much faster. They will be able to go from marketing ideas to actual implementation much faster. And they will start testing and trying and improving and iterating, because it's all about that, right? It's all about people trying things, learning from that, adopting, and then improving.
Absolutely.
And if you can use AI to increase the pace of that cycle, then you will start moving at a accelerated pace compared to everyone else. And I think that in industries like banking, but also in other industries, you will start to see a few companies that do that, and we will refer to them as like AI companies, or we'll call them like, I call them like, tigers or something, and they will simply produce more value, more profitability, be more efficient than the competitors. And I think maybe at a scale we haven't seen historically. Like it has happened. I mean, to some degree, like tech companies, Zalando beat out like, the traditional fashion retailer or whatever. Like you saw some of that already. But now I think it may happen at an even faster pace than.
And how do you use AI personally?
So I use it to me personally as a CEO, the biggest change has been that I was never an engineer myself. So whenever we were discussing product, I could look at screenshots, I could interact with UI, I could say, I think the product should look like this, so work like that. But the second we got into coding, I would be like, or technical architecture, I would say, well, I don't have myself the skill set to engage in that conversation. So I would leave it all to the engineers. But the second ChatGPT came along, I was like, oh, okay, should we use this database over that database? Or should we use this architecture, whatever? Now I have this friend who's always available to me who can teach me about anything. And so the second I'm just like, oh, but what about this and what about that? And then I will actually engage in technical matters at the level I never did before. And I think it's good. And I've seen other leaders at Klarna do the same, which actually brings technology and the business side much closer to each other, because it's almost like we have an instant translator, right? And I can even code myself. I can write a suggestion of code and I started reviewing code. And if I don't understand the code, which I didn't do historically, I just copy paste that code into ChatGPT and say, explain it to me, what's going on? And I can start connecting the business logic to the engineering logic. And so that has changed for me dramatically. That's how I use it predominantly every day, to be involved in technical decisions at a level I wouldn't be historically. And I think that is to the benefit of the company.
I again have to ask for this exciting news that might come up. There are rumors you're now planning an IPO this fall. Is that correct?
Yeah. We have been very honest about the fact that we are getting closer to our IPO. I think fall sounds a little bit ambitious, but it's going to happen. And we've been around as a company for a long period of time. Sure. So I think maybe 20th anniversary would. Nice timing.
That's true. And I have another 20 for you. So are you looking at a valuation of $20 billion like Bloomberg reports indicate?
Well, it's for others to set the price of the company, right? I think that again, coming back to what I said previously is that the valuations have been up, they can go down sometimes. To me, the key thing is that, if I look at banking, if I look at the traditional banks, this is an industry with massive excess profits. There's too much money being made. And if you look at Germany or Sweden, many other countries, it's not uncommon that the large banks make over 100 euros per citizen in profit every year. And that's money that should stay with the consumer. I much rather see consumers use that money for a family trip or, whatever else they'd like to spend it on. And so it needs more competition. It definitely does. Now, at the same point of time, why is banking so non-competitive? It's because of regulation. It's because of it's because of how the industry is set up. It's very high barriers of entry. And also it's a product that customers are, careful with shifting. It's not, you trust your bank and you don't want to shift to something new that you are not familiar with. So it's really an industry that takes time to change. And but if you do it, and if a few companies manage to do it at a large scale, then the rewards are much more than the numbers you mentioned. And those could be companies worth, $100 billion because it's just massive, especially if you do it on a global level.
So I'm sure we have to talk again in a couple of months. Thank you very much.
Same, and thank you for taking the time. Appreciate it.
Und damit sind wir auch schon wieder am Ende von Handelsblatt Disrupt. Wie immer freue ich mich über Kommentare in der Handelsblatt Disrupt LinkedIn-Gruppe oder senden Sie mir gerne eine Mail. Die Details finden Sie in den Shownotes. Danke an dieser Stelle auch für die Unterstützung von Lukas Teppler und Regina Körner und Migo Fecke von professionalpodcast.com, dem Dienstleister für Strategieberatung und Podcastproduktion. Wir hören uns dann nächste Woche Freitag wieder. Bis dahin wünsche ich Ihnen interessante digitale, aber natürlich auch analoge Zeiten. Ihr Sebastian Matthes.
Über Gehalt spricht man nicht? Noch. Denn die Zeiten ändern sich. Und das Thema Gehaltstransparenz rückt immer mehr in den Fokus. Die EU hat 2023 eine neue Richtlinie verabschiedet, die Unternehmen ab 2026 verpflichten wird, offener mit Gehältern umzugehen. Was das für Unternehmen bedeutet und wie sie sich optimal darauf vorbereiten können, darüber spreche ich heute mit Felicitas von Rauch. Sie ist Head of Compensation Partner bei der Stepstone Group. Bevor wir ins Detail gehen, kannst du uns kurz erklären, was genau diese Richtlinie beinhaltet?
Also die EU-Entgelttransparenzrichtlinie, ein sehr langes Wort, zielt darauf ab, die geschlechterspezifischen Lohnunterschiede zu verringern, also den Unterschied der Gehälter zwischen Mann und Frau. Und dabei gelten 3 Pflichten für Unternehmen. Das ist einmal, dass Unternehmen künftig ihre Gehaltsinformationen bereits im Bewerbungsprozess offenlegen, also zum Beispiel schon in der Stellenanzeige. Zweitens, dass die Unternehmen einen Bericht über den sogenannten Gender Pay Gap veröffentlichen müssen. Und dann drittens, und das ist eben ganz wichtig, haben Beschäftigte das Recht, eine Auskunft über ihre Bezahlung im Vergleich zu KollegInnen zu erhalten. Und vor allem auch, nach welchen Kriterien das eigene Gehalt festgesetzt wurde.
Ab wann kommen diese Pflichten und gilt das für alle Unternehmen?
Ja, die Richtlinie tritt ab 2026 in Kraft und gilt für Unternehmen ab 50 Mitarbeitende. Dabei gibt es noch ein paar Unterschiede, je nach Unternehmensgröße, welche der 3 gerade genannten Pflichten gilt und ab wann. Typischerweise gilt, je größer das Unternehmen, desto früher gelten die Pflichten.
Und wie können Unternehmen jetzt vorgehen, damit sie rechtzeitig fertig sind, wenn die Richtlinie kommt?
Also Simone, du musst dir vorstellen, Gehälter anzupassen und Gehaltsstrukturen aufzusetzen, braucht richtig viel Zeit und vor allem richtig viel Feingefühl. Gehalt ist, wie wir sehen, mit das sensibelste Thema für Beschäftigte und ist damit auch der Kündigungsgrund Nummer 1. Deswegen empfehlen wir Unternehmen, jetzt mit der Vorbereitung auf die neue Gesetzeslage zu starten und nicht erst 2026, wenn die Richtlinie dann im deutschen Gesetz in Kraft tritt.
Ganz konkret, was können erste Schritte sein?
Erstens, nehmt euch eine Betriebseinheit vor, zum Beispiel die Controlling-Funktion, und startet mit dieser Einheit. Dann kriegt ihr ein ganz gutes Gefühl für den Status quo und den Aufwand. Das Zweite ist, überlegt euch jetzt ein transparentes und objektives Entgeltsystem für euer Unternehmen und eben nicht erst in 2026. Und drittens, nutzt am besten die Gehaltsrunden dieses Jahr noch und auf jeden Fall 2025 und 2026, um eventuelle Lohnlücken zu schließen.
Das klingt nach viel Arbeit. Wo bekommen Unternehmen Unterstützung?
Stepstone hat unter stepstone.de/HR Wissen Kategorie Gehalt kostenfreie Informationen in Form von Artikeln, aber auch Webinaren zur Verfügung gestellt. Oder was ich natürlich mit Freude anbiete, ist, macht gerne einen unverbindlichen Termin aus mit unseren Gehaltsexpertinnen unter kontakt@compensation-partner.de. Und in dem Termin schauen wir uns ausnahmsweise kostenfrei eine Stelle aus eurem Unternehmen an und erörtern entlang dieser Beispielstelle, wie das Gehalt einerseits wettbewerbsfähig, aber eben auch compliant entlang der Richtlinie festgesetzt werden kann.
Alles klar, danke schön.